I think, if you're lucky and you're surrounded by loved ones, I think most of your loved ones want to talk to you about it. They just don't know how to bring it up because they don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't want to remind you of that time. But I think listening to what you were saying there, a real moment for me was when I stopped thinking about what it was like to be me before my stroke and after stroke. When I stopped thinking of those people as two different people and just said, well, I am what I am, and everything that's happened in between now and being born is just made me who I am, for the good and for the bad,
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. This is episode 213. And before we get into that, I just wanted to let you know that in August, the podcast reached more downloads than ever before. In fact, it was more than 6,300 downloads for the month of August. It is an amazing figure. It is a figure that has taken the best part of 7 years to achieve. So I first started this podcast in 2015 and it was intermittent. I wasn't releasing a lot of episodes and I wasn't very good at podcasting and I wasn't very consistent. I was still recovering from the stroke and from all the challenges that came after brain surgery. And it wasn't something that I was doing as often as I'm doing now. There wasn't a lot of people that I was able to interview because I didn't know a lot of people and a lot of people didn't know me. So now that I'm at that stage where people have got to know the podcast and people are contacting me to get onto the podcast so that I can interview them, then it's been a much easier process for me to release an episode more regularly and get more people coming onto the show. That has resulted in consistency and that has resulted in people from all around the world finding the podcast and downloading it and listening to it. So this was an amazing thing that I experienced with the podcast just in the last month. So I'm very excited and I just wanted to share with you. So now that that's been said, thank you for listening and thank you for being here and for downloading an episode. I really appreciate it. If you're a stroke survivor with a story to share though, and you have an experience with stroke and you've been thinking about reaching out to be a guest on the show, but we're waiting for the right time, this is it. Now, if you go to recoveryafterstroke.com/contact, you'll find a form that you can fill out to apply to be a guest on the show. As soon as I receive it, I will respond with more details on how you can choose a time that works for you and me for us to meet over Zoom and record an interview. So get on and do that as soon as you get to the end of this episode or pause this episode, do that and then come back. Now, my guest today is Cleary, who was 39 when he experienced a bleed on the brain after attending a music festival with friends. Cleary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Bill.
My pleasure, mate. 13 minutes and 24 seconds to work out all the technical stuff, and here we are.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good for me, actually, 13 minutes, to be honest. It could take a lot longer, so we're doing okay.
We are. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you, man.
Okay, so 2nd of April, 2017. In fact, I'll take you to the day before, Bill, if I may.
Yeah.
So I went to a concert with some friends down in the south of England, which is where I'm originally from. Had a really great night out, really good time. I felt like I was on good form. My friends thought I was on good form. On the way home, I felt particularly tired. So it's quite a long drive, 2.5 hours or so. And I thought, maybe I'm just a little bit hungover. Maybe I've just kind of overdone it the night before. And then I got home. All was pretty standard. Had some dinner with my wife. My daughter was actually, ironically, in Southampton where I was because it was the school holiday. So she goes down to spend some time with her grandparents, or did back then. That night, got up to go to the loo in the house we lived in. We lived right in the countryside, no natural light. Got up to go for a loo, come out of the bathroom, and I genuinely thought we'd been broken into because I felt like somebody had smashed me over the head with a baseball bat or something big. fell over, was on the floor in the hallway between our bathroom and our bedroom. My wife obviously heard this big bang, come out and said, "What's happened?" And I laughed. I remember actually vividly, I said, "I've bloody fallen over." And my sense of humour tells me that when an adult falls over, it's generally quite funny. And she said, "Oh, okay, well, let's get you up." She turned the light on, and I said, "You're going to have to turn that off. I've got a really bad migraine or something going on." Luckily, she kind of said, "No, there's something wrong with you." So my face had all drooped, and I mean, every symptom that you hear about for a stroke, I had. And she sat me on the side of the bed. She said, "I need to turn on the light on. I just need to look at you. I'm going to call the ambulance." And I'm a man of no fuss. Like most British men, I'm kind of quite conservative and quite kind of, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll sleep it off and I'll be okay tomorrow. It will be good." But I knew, if I'm honest, I knew all the symptoms. I'd done enough first aid courses in various jobs I'd had over the years. I thought, I'm having a stroke here. This is what's happening. And she said to me, "It looks like you're having a stroke, but you can't be having a stroke. You know, I was pretty fit. I think the week before I'd done a 10K run. You know, that can't be happening to you." And I kind of said, "You're right. No, it absolutely can't be happening to me." And she said, "But I'm going to call the ambulance just in case." And she actually said to me, I think years ago, I'd said to her, "Worst case scenario, if you call an ambulance, you might look a little bit of a fool. Worst case scenario. But that's the worst that can happen. Whereas if you don't call an ambulance, someone could die or whatever." So luckily for me, she did. They immediately said, "We think you're having a stroke. We need to get you to hospital." We went to Northampton Hospital. And I think this was the only time I was scared, actually, Bill, was we went in, my wife was in bits, and they were talking about they were going to send me to another hospital further away in Oxford. And my wife was like, "Well, I don't know how I'm going to get home. You know, how will I get home from Oxford?" And the doctor just said, "Right, can we all just stop here? I'm just going to give you," and I remember his exact words. He said, "I'm going to give you all a dose of reality. If we don't get him to Oxford, he will die. We haven't got the facility here to do what we need to do to keep him alive. But if we get him to Oxford, he's got a 50-50 chance." And I'm thinking, this is actually really happening, isn't it?
I'm hearing
so,
it.
You know,
they're bloody telling you, mate. Wow, what a nuts situation.
Yeah, and I mean, like I say, day before, out with friends, having a great day. You know, had quite a high-powered job at the time. Was kind of, I think I was on call that weekend, and all this was going through my head still. When they're telling me you've got a 50-50 chance of seeing through this, if we get you to the hospital on time. And there was, you know, that was still, would have been about a 45-minute drive away in an ambulance. So he's kind of thinking, "Oh God, this is pretty bad." So it was the only time I was actually scared. And then, to be fair, I got into Oxford Hospital, and they kind of put me at ease that they said, "You know, you couldn't be in a better hospital for this. You know, we are experts and renowned around the world for neurosurgery and stuff." They kind of put me under. The next day I woke up. But just for good measure, Bill, the night after, I had a cardiac arrest. So I had a stroke, then a cardiac arrest the day after. Everything just give up. And they said it was as a result of the stroke, the body just kind of shut down. So I had to have the old, had to be resussed and restarted. I mean, I don't remember any of that. But yeah, no, it was, you know, that wasn't, you know, people ask me a lot, was that scary? Like my friends would say, "Was that scary having a cardiac arrest?" I said, "I just woke up in a different room." So I remember going to sleep very vividly in this room, and there was a couple of old boys opposite me that I'd had a bit of a conversation with, you know, late in the night. One, in fact, George, I remember, fought in World War II and had done hand-to-hand combat, which I was absolutely, you know, flabbergasted by. You know, he said, "I, you know, went beyond enemy lines and had to."
Oh my!
You know, and I kept pushing him for the answer. He said, "Yes, Lee, I had to kill people." I was like, "Oh my God, you know, that must have been quite an experience." He said, "Well, it's you or them." And it kind of really kind of struck home. But then, yes, the next morning I woke up in a different room, and there was a nurse kind of cleaning down a workspace. And I sort of woke up and said, "I didn't go to sleep here." And she said, "You've had quite the night." And I said, "Oh, have I?" She said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Oh, my chest hurts a bit." And that's where they put the old jump start machine back on me. But yeah, that's all I remember of that bit. And to be honest, the next 2 weeks were a bit of a blur.
Yeah.
I often say when my friends talk to me about it, the easiest bit was being in the hospital. The hardest bit was coming out. And yeah, it was the bit that I was so hungry to do and get out of hospital, because it's just bloody horrible being in a hospital for any reason, for any period of time. You miss all your creature comforts. And I was so eager to get out that actually the minute I did, and the minute I remember literally sitting in, it was my car, but my wife was driving, obviously. I remember sitting there thinking, I've actually got to go home and I'm going to have to combat the stairs. I'm going to have to combat the little step to get into my house. All these things that you take for granted suddenly become massive challenges, you know?
Absolutely.
So that was probably the scariest bit, was actually coming out of hospital.
Absolutely. They become challenges. So the concert, was it a long event? Was it more intense than normal? Was it just a regular, long drive to a great event? Was there any drinking and substances, any of that stuff?
No. At the time, I worked in Southampton Monday to Friday or Monday to Thursday. It was actually, the band Oasis.
Yeah.
It was a tribute band to them. Me and my friends back in the 90s were well into them. That was it kind of seemed like a weekly or monthly thing to go and see them. So we went to see this tribute band. It was with two of my oldest friends that we used to go and see all that music together with. So it was kind of like a little mini reunion in an area of Southampton that we always used to go out kind of socialising. I had a few beers, no doubt, but it's funny you say about substances, because one of the doctors was convinced that the night before I'd been doing cocaine. And because he said it was very common to either a brain hemorrhage or a bleed on the brain. And even my wife was like, because maybe in my youth I had kind of done things like that. Even she was like, if you have been, I won't be mad here and now. We just need to get you better. So just tell them if you have.
I'll be mad later.
Honestly, right up to about a day before I left hospital, this same doctor said to me, I'll never tell anybody if you have. He said, you're doing so well and you live. And I said, on my life, on my daughter's life, not for years have I done anything like that. And, and it was years and years. He said, well, I said, so that's not going to affect me, is it? 15, 20 years ago. He said, oh God, no. He said, we thought in the immediate, lead up to your situation maybe, but no. So it was it was a boozy night, but no more than an average night out with friends, So it was certainly normal for me and my buddies. So yeah, no, very normal week leading up to it. A few little stresses at work, but nothing. A lot of friends said, "Oh, you had quite a big job then." Was it the stress of work? Because I think that can bring on obviously high blood pressure and hypertension and stuff. But no, I wasn't. I've never been somebody to feel stressed. My wife would say she'd like it if I could be stressed every now and then. So just don't get it.
How old were you?
39.
You were 39. Top at your game. What kind of work were you doing?
So I worked for B&Q, which is like a DIY retailer in England. They're the biggest actually in England. And I kind of led up kind of one of the departments there, or looked after kind of that's like kitchens and bathrooms basically for the retail side of the business. So it's a pretty big job, but I loved it, to be honest, at the time. Really loved it. My perspective changed after I kind of got well again. But yeah, no, at the time I loved it. I didn't find it particularly stressful. Worked with a great bunch of people who were super supportive actually when all this happened to me.
Yeah. So it's been a few years, and what did you come home with that you had to recover from? Obviously the heart issue was probably really taxing on the body, but then a lot of stroke survivors often wake up with some issues regarding their...
So I had complete paralysis down one side, down my left side. The hardest, that was tough. Learning to walk again was really, really tough. And, full credit to anybody that has to go through that. I was a young man able to run 10K, runs and stuff like that. And I thought, I'm okay. Even in hospital, when they said you might have to think about the fact that you're going to be in a wheelchair. I remember having a bet with the physio, because he said to me, Lee, I think the reality is you probably will need walking aids or be in a wheelchair. And I just said, I absolutely will not be doing that. I said, that's not going to be happening. I completely accept that I might not play football again or play tennis again or run 10K again. I can live with that, but I'm not going to be in a wheelchair. And they started talking about measuring my house up for ramps and stuff. And I said, we're not doing that. And I literally said to them, if you do that, I'm going to be really, really, mad and unhappy. So I had that. But the hardest thing I think was the fatigue.
Yeah. So do you think
it was the fatigue? I had no energy.
So that
the
part,
energy levels were just.
That part where you said, I'm not going to have any of that. I'm not going to have this in my house. That's not going to be installed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's got something to do with your recovery, in that because of that you had a better recovery, or do you think that the recovery was going to go well anyway? They just didn't know how well it was going to go. Do you think it played a role?
I think I'm really belligerent as a person, and I think I'm really kind of, against the odds. I'll always kind of back myself to prevail, and in any situation I'm super competitive. So I think that helps. But I honestly think it's lady luck. It happened to me. It's terrible that it happened to me, and it was horrendous at the time and all those things. But at 39, whether you're patient, I was lucky, I had a quick and good recovery. But I think if you're patient, you can get there. And at 39, I think your chances obviously are better than if you're at 79 or 89.
Yeah.
And so I think a little bit of luck.
And it also depends on how badly impacted the area of the brain was that has been injured. So
Absolutely,
for some people, it's catastrophically impacted, and then it's not coming back online. And for other people, it's kind of, I'm not sure if the word's temporarily impacted, or the amount of cell death hasn't been that dramatic.
Yeah.
So it comes back online and a little bit sooner or better.
And I was very lucky. Got some, my wife was amazing. And it's funny how it's anytime I don't talk that much about it now. It'll crop up from time to time with friends and family and stuff. And everyone says, so my wife's name is Nikki, and they always say, Nikki saved your life, when she called the ambulance. And I said, well, that is true, but I was very clearly having a stroke. You're not just going to say, crack on, get on with it. It's okay. I said, so I think, yeah, it's absolutely true, but she did what anybody would do. I said, but actually, she saved my life when I come out of hospital. Because when I couldn't get out of bed because I was depressed and I just had no energy and all those things, and there was nurses come in, because the stroke aftercare, I have to say, was fantastic in the part of England that I live in. It was, they were absolutely brilliant. She literally made me get out of bed, made me get changed, get some clothes on, have a shower, all those things. So actually, that was a bigger impact than I think calling the ambulance.
Yeah, right. Okay. That is important. A lot of people do struggle, especially after coming home, because you're coming home different, and there's a whole bunch of things that are impacting your ability to be yourself, or the previous self, or whatever you identify as before you had the stroke,
I struggled with it for years, but yeah, I think mentally I struggled with it for years. So even down to, there's nothing really, nothing that I couldn't do before. I've even managed to have a little game of football here and there and stuff like that. So there's nothing particularly, I feel weaker as a person. So I really struggled with this for a while. And what I mean is physically, I felt quite fit and strong. And I was walking down an alleyway a while back, a very safe part of the country, by the way. No, not like a hotbed for crime. I was walking back to a hotel it was a business night out, actually, been out for a bite to eat with some work colleagues. And I walked down this alleyway and thought, if somebody attacks me now, my balance isn't great. I'm going to be in real trouble. Whereas previously I would have been like, if somebody attacks me, they'll get a bloody good hiding, But so that for years, I've really struggled with that. And my wife had to say to me one day, look, when was the last time you got into physical combat with somebody? And I said, I don't know, when I was about 15. And she said, yes, exactly. So for half of your life, you've not had to do that. What makes you think suddenly people are going to look at you now and go, let's attack that guy? So yeah, balance was probably the last thing to come back, was that being really steady on the feet.
I'm laughing, but I really relate to that. I relate to that part where you're not feeling, I know your words were weaker. I don't feel weaker. I just feel vulnerable, more vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's probably a good way of putting it.
You know, and vulnerable for me also means that because of my mortality, because of the fact that I am immortal now, where before I didn't ever consider the possibility that I was immortal. Now
it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to face. Your own mortality is a hard thing to face.
Yeah, I'm more
whoever you are, whatever way.
I feel more vulnerable to the elements of life, to just life, the fact that with life comes death. So like that part makes me feel vulnerable. And then the fact that somebody might jump me, well, whatever. That's a possibility too, very rare, but it's a possibility. But I do feel like I'm less likely to be able to resist an attack if there was kind of like just a random attack that happened. And then I really get no sort of sense of like self, what's the word? Self kind of, like I'm able to be self-protective or self, I don't know what the word is, but feeling like I'm able to kind of look after myself in that sort of situation. Yeah. I feel like I'd be able to be more easily overcome. And
yeah,
that's the weird part. Like, I don't know whether it's true or just imaginary or just blokes being, blokes. I think
it's that. I actually do think it's that. I think it's to do with, blokes being blokes, and I've always been considered a man's man and all those things, and a bit of I wouldn't say a tough guy. That would be pushing it too far, but certainly somebody that could look after themselves if the need arose. And I think then to suddenly think, well, I couldn't do that. But then the logical side of my wife says, why would you even think that when you've never had to do that for such a long time? Your life's not like being Bruce Willis in Die Hard. That's not happening to you every day. You work in an office. When you go out, you go to nice bars or restaurants or hotels or whatever. You always stay, as you say, you always stay in a nice part of town wherever you stay. I'm not going to get attacked, am I? But I guess your mind does funny things to you, and if you feel like that, there's not a lot anybody can say to change that. I think if you feel like that, it's something you're always going to feel, isn't it?
It sounds like you think of yourself more highly than other people think of you. You think of yourself as a bit of a rough and ready.
Definitely more than my wife. Definitely more than my wife.
I love it. She knows the real you. You think you see something different in the mirror, and she's like, I know the real him.
Well, when I look in the mirror, I see Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator.
Yeah, I hear you, mate. I hear you. That's interesting. That's interesting. So, how old was your daughter at the time?
So she's getting GCSE results next week, actually, so she'd have been 11. So the impact on her wasn't immediate because we didn't tell her, which I'm still not sure is the right thing or wrong thing. But I mean, my friend, my brother, a few people that come to see me in hospital in the immediate aftermath just broke down into tears because of how I looked. And, I said to one of my friends, you're supposed to be here to bloody support me, and you're crying like a baby, He's like, well, it's just, I'm not used to seeing you like this. And I thought, well, if this is like a man of the world that's seen, different things and been faced with other people being poorly before, what is my, my little girl has been protected from all of that kind of thing. So we waited and didn't tell her for a while. She stayed with some relatives for a bit while my wife was doing the traveling to and from hospital and stuff. So yeah, she was 11. I think it had a big impact on her. She laughs about it now and jokes about it. We sort of joke about, when I was poorly, and her friends will say, well, did you have a cold or something? And she's like, no, Dad died for 6 minutes. Had a stroke and then a cardiac arrest. It was really bad, So yeah, no, I think it had a massive impact on her, but I think she's quite resilient like me. She just bounced through it. I think because I was constantly like, don't listen to what anybody says. I'm not going to be in a wheelchair. I'm not going to do that. I will be back to, she used to play football at the time, and I'll be back on the sidelines cheering you on. I'll be doing that in no time. And, fortunately for us, it did turn out like that. If I'm saying no time, it was a good 6 months before I was able to do everything. But, I appreciate how lucky I am, because I know there's people out there that don't get that same break. That's for sure.
So death for 6 minutes, or was it just like being asleep? Did you see anyone on the other
honestly,
side?
Don't remember anything about it. I mean, I can joke about it now, obviously, because it never quite come to fruition. But I always say, the devil just wasn't quite ready for me yet, But no, I don't remember any of it. I literally woke up in a different room, and had nobody told me, and then a consultant speak to me the next day, I almost would have thought someone was lying, because I just don't remember any of it. But apparently they did the resuscitation on me, and then apparently I just bolted upright, took this great big intake of air and started snoring. And the consultant who oversaw it all said, one of the nurses said, "Is that normal?" And he said, "If he's making a noise, he's alive, isn't he?" That's really good. So he actually said to me, keep snoring.
Wow, man. It's just thinking about it and talking to somebody that's been to the other side, like, it's bizarre and intense, and it makes me feel really grateful for modern technology, amongst other things. And I know it's just intense. I just can't get my head around it, even though I haven't been there where you've been, and I've been kind of in another kind of phase of that. It still fascinates me that I'm able to talk to you, and you were clinically considered dead for 6 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just intense, and it's amazing that we're talking on a podcast about stroke. You're on the other side of the planet. I'm over here in Australia, and here we are. And there's never been a better time to be unwell, to have a stroke. Not that I want anyone to be unwell or have a stroke, but if there was a time,
you're completely right,
in history, this is it. This is the time. I get.
And I think COVID's helped, Bill, because people are used to doing this sort of thing more now.
Okay.
And I think if you'd have said to me in the immediate aftermath, would you go and talk to this chap in Australia about having a stroke? I'd have said, absolutely not. I'm not going to talk on a screen to somebody over the other side of the world. I just wouldn't have entertained it. But I think now that this, for work, for a lot of people, for communicating to family, is the new normal. I think you're right. From a support point of view, there's not a better time to have, I guess, any kind of illness, because you've got that support at the touch of a button,
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. So you connected to me because you're on Instagram and you're following my Instagram page, the Recovery After Stroke page. And I put a call out for people to come onto the podcast to see who was interested. And I got overwhelmed. I've got episodes booked in every Friday and Saturday Australian time for months, and it's good and bad. It's not bad because I don't want to do it. It's bad because people are waiting a long time to get on. What made you feel like you needed to get on and share your story? Because you haven't done this before in this type of format.
No. I did a little bit of volunteering a while back for the local stroke association, and that was very similar to this, peer on peer kind of talking and counselling. And I found that really rewarding, talking to kind of, especially people at a similar age that were going through that kind of immediate aftermath, and being able to say, do you know what, to feel the way you're feeling. We were talking about feeling really vulnerable. I was talking to another chap, maybe similar sort of age to me, early 40s. And he just said, I just feel like I can't, I won't go into his personal details, but he's saying there's certain things that he can't do now that he used to be able to do. And I just said, that's going to be normal. If half of your body is feeling temporarily redundant, then you're just not going to be able to do what you used to be able to do. So it's completely normal to have that, to feel a little lesser than you maybe did, but it'll come back in time if you work at it, I guess. Or I guess you get used to a new version of you.
Yeah. Did part of the talking about it in your volunteering role help make the memory less triggering or less anxiety provoking? Because there is a real reason to talk about what you've been through for lots of people, for lots of different things, right? And it's part of a process called exposure therapy. You talk about it. The more you talk about it, the more it becomes something that you're talking about rather than something that you're reliving. Did you find that talking about it helps do that, kind of put it in the past where it belongs as an event rather than as something that's happening?
Do you know what? When I talk about it now, I feel like I'm telling a story about something that happened to somebody else.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it happened to me. I mean, I'm not stupid. I know it did.
Mm-hmm.
I know absolutely it did. But it feels so, I guess, detached now from who I am. And I get that it has shaped me into being who I am. But I feel so detached from it happening that I can talk about it. And I think you're right. I think it is good therapy. I think it certainly makes me realise how lucky I am when I talk to people. Because it. But for the grace of God, as they say, could have gone the other way, and wouldn't be here now. So yeah, I think it's really good therapy, and I think it's nice to be able to empathise with others that are going through a tough time as well. And I think that makes you feel, you doing what you're doing, talking to all these different people that I guess are in different stages of their recovery. Must be quite rewarding to know that you're helping them. Because I can tell you now, I'm really grateful for the chance to talk to you today. It's helping me. So sure as how it must be helping other people as well.
Yeah, I never expected it, believe it or not. I mean, I know it's obvious, but I never expected it was about me, this podcast, at the beginning. And then as I started to talk about it more and more, I started to feel like you. I started to seem like I was talking about something else, somebody else, or a past me that I didn't really associate with. I've got the symptoms or the aftermath of it. But again, even the aftermath, even the numbness, the balance issues, all the things that I've got, I kind of don't remember a time when I didn't have them, although I know that I actually did. I know because I used to also play football, and I also used to have no balance issues, and I also used to have no numbness in my left side. But now it's like it's not like I'm comparing myself to that time anymore. I've stopped doing that. I've stopped saying, oh gosh, I remember a time when I didn't have this stuff. Oh my God, I wish it went back to that. I don't do that. So every time I speak about it, puts it further and further into a place where it's not harming me when I talk about it, and it's being really useful when I do talk about it for the other people that are early on in that stage. So I've spoken about it on more than 200 episodes, so many times, and so many other people that I've spoken to it about. And I hang out with stroke survivors everywhere now in Melbourne. So yeah, it's like a real big thing that we see that I'm experiencing through a different lens, and it's a completely different filter. It's not the same filter that it used to be. It's hard to describe.
Well,
and why I'm saying it, Lee, why I'm saying it is I want to encourage people to talk about it, to talk about what they've been through, and to as many people as possible, as often as possible. Of course, if the people aren't willing to talk to you about it, then that's cool too. But from that perspective, I'm just trying to encourage people and give them another example of you, hopefully, that's sort of been through that similar place that I've been through.
I think, if you're lucky and you're surrounded by loved ones, I think most of your loved ones want to talk to you about it. They just don't know how to bring it up because they don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't want to remind you of that time. But I think listening to what you were saying there, a real moment for me was when I stopped thinking about what it was like to be me before my stroke and after stroke. When I stopped thinking of those people as two different people and just said, well, I am what I am, and everything that's happened in between now and being born is just made me who I am, for the good and for the bad,
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
I think that minute when you stop thinking about what it was like before, because for years, it's easy to become a victim and not a survivor. It's really easy to do that. But I think for ages I was a victim of it in my own mind, of going, well, of course, if something would happen where I'd lose my balance or feel really fatigued or whatever, so maybe I have to go in from work early, I'd think, God, the old Lee wouldn't have done this. But I think I then just got to a point where I thought, you know what? This is what I am. Forget the old Lee, currently the new Lee or whatever. Just focus on the future and what you can be and what you can achieve in life and what you need to do still to have a good life. So I think that minute, I wouldn't say there was a specific minute, but I remember just a while back thinking, you know what? I just don't think of those two things anymore, like pre and post stroke. I just think of me as me. And I think once it becomes that, I think everything becomes a little easier to deal with.
Yeah. When you have a sports injury, this is how I relate to it now. And I didn't play football for a lot of years and never professionally or anything or at any sort of high level. But I injured my left toe, my little pinky toe, my left one on my left foot. And what happened was I kicked the ball, and at the same time, what I was doing is I was stopping somebody from kicking the ball. And as I put it out, my foot out, he kicked my toe, and the toe never broke, never got damaged to that extent. But what it did was really bruise the bone. It really deeply bruised the bone. And then it had some swelling around it. And then for many, many years afterwards, every time I would be in a position where I was tackling somebody and we just had normal contact, the toe would swell up and get really impacted and affected and let me know that, it's struggling again or it's been injured again or something. But it was never the same impact that hit it every time afterwards. And even to this day, even as I'm talking about it now, I can sense that toe feels differently from my other toe. Yeah. And I never think about it in a way, it never does the whole, in my head, it never does the whole, oh my God, I wish my toe was different. And I never do I remember when my toe didn't do that. It just always reminds me that it's there without really stopping me from being who I want to be. If I was able to play football now, which I probably couldn't, it wouldn't stop me from playing. But in the game, it will remind me every so often in a tackle that here I am, and I just need to be aware of it. And I think it's a reminder, and I need to be aware of it so that I can alter the way that I go about things, do things differently, smarter, more cautiously. I'm not sure what the actual correct sentence is, but that's kind of how I feel about myself now. I've got to adjust, and I've got to find a new way to apply myself to the daily tasks that I have to do so that I can get through my day. And I can't do it like I used to do before, because that would be a folly. That would be something that's not right, because I'm different. I have to go about things differently. So it's this whole thought process is really kind of expanding my horizons and my ability to contemplate how I'm going to go about my day. Whereas before I never thought about anything and I was never mindful in the moment. Now I am a lot, because I've got to pay attention to where my leg is, for example, if I'm on a ladder or if I'm going up steps. So it actually brings my attention away from the past, away from the anxiety of the future. What does the future hold? And it makes me really focus and concentrate on the now, because if I don't, I'm going to trip going up that ladder or trip coming down those stairs. Do you know what I mean? Does that?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. That really makes sense, actually. Really does.
So with work for you, how did you go about getting back to work, and were you able to go back to your old job?
I was, and you know what? I think I think I mentioned earlier that my work colleagues and my bosses at the time were fantastic when it happened. So when my wife made that call, Lee won't be in tomorrow, or for the foreseeable future, he's really, really poorly. This has happened. My line manager, Simon, at the time was fantastic. He was, right, we're going to get you a hotel near the hospital. So you have to do the driving. She was like, no, I'd rather be in my own bed at night. I don't need that. And he said, well, we'll get you a driver to and from, the hospital to Lee in hospital. And she said, well, they told me that you need to survive the next 3 or 4 days, but there's also a chance that you might not. She said, I don't really want to be with a stranger if I find out that my husband's just died. And that was really hard for me to hear when I come out, because she was telling me all this about how great these people were for me. But when I went back to work, I have to say, I think, and it wasn't for the want of trying to understand, I think because I appeared to everybody, like everyone was like, oh, I mean, at the time, I think they thought Lee's lost a bit of weight and he's gone a bit grey, because that had happened. But I think some of that was, I was turning 40, so that's going to happen, right? Certainly the greyness, not the losing weight. It normally goes the other way, and it certainly has since. But I think everybody thought Lee's just back as normal. I looked the same. I was a little unsteady on my face and everything. I think someone said to me, you just look a lot more thoughtful about your movement now. And I said, well, that's because I have to be. I can't just swing around on a swivel chair now and jump up and go down to the coffee machine or whatever. I have to turn around a bit more gently and think about where I'm going and think about what I need to do. But I think I really lost my sense of, what's the word, that inner monologue, that filter. And the job I had to keep everybody happy. It was really important to keep everybody motivated and happy. And I'd just sit there in meetings, and I won't swear, I won't ruin the podcast, and I just literally say that's not really right, but in a really unprofessional way. And I think in the end, me and that business just came to the agreement that it was, better that we parted ways. And we did it on friendly terms, and it's kind of financially beneficial for me and stuff. So it was all good. But I think it was hard for them to understand when I come back that I was never going to be the person that I was before. I was never going to be as bothered about a multi-billion-pound organisation not selling quite as many kitchens as they needed to. Because now I look at that in perspective and say, well, it's not really a big deal, is it? Because they're still going to be able to function tomorrow, and everyone's still going to have a job, and nothing terrible is going to happen if we don't sell that extra kitchen or whatever. So I think, once that happened to me, my sense of perspective on that job was completely different, and I needed to be a different person to what I am carrying that job. So work's completely different for me now. I run my own little business, which is tuning cars, remapping cars, all on a laptop, which is great because I can manage my own time. A long day for me these days is like 8 hours at a push, and that's including traveling and stuff, which is more than capable of doing that. And I really enjoy it. It's really nice meeting. I'm a bit of a petrol head at heart, so it's really nice meeting fellow petrol heads and seeing them enthusiastic about their cars. And I'm going to go fast. And you're like, yeah, well, watch out for the police. You're going to get yourself in trouble. But now it's really, really cool. I really like it now. It's got a real good balance. I'm home more. So I think I mentioned earlier, I used to stay away Monday through Friday pretty much. And that was hard for me. I had a realization. We bought the house I live in now, actually, just after I'd had the stroke. And a friend of mine, I was in this hotel. This was right at the time when I was thinking, this job's not for me anymore. I was kind of already in that place. And there's got to be more to life than just staying in a hotel, getting up in the morning, going to work, going back to a hotel, eat, sleep, work, repeat, sort of kind of that was kind of the life I was living.
Yeah.
And he said to me, how's that lovely house of yours? And I said, you know what, Andy, I have no idea. I'm never bloody there. Ask me about room 302 in this hotel. I'll tell you all about it, because I'm in there every night. But yeah, ask me about my house and I don't know. And I remember thinking, that can't be right. This is the home that we wanted as a family. We all chose it together and we're all really happy to live it. But, I was never here. So actually getting made redundant or parting ways with that job, everybody was saying, no, it's really bad. They shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, well, it's okay. I walked out with enough money to start this venture that I do now. And it's all worked out okay. And actually, I was really grateful that moment when they were like, it's all over. You can just go home. It was kind of a real big moment for me.
Sounds like it was a big relief. You know, the thing you just said about the house, that is one of the most profound things I've ever heard. Okay, so I'm going to repeat what I heard. So you were working to be able to afford to build a bigger, better, beautiful house. And because of the fact that you were working so much, you were never there. And it was just this thing that was driving you to work.
2 days a week.
And work and work.
I was here 2 days a week.
That's insane.
Yeah. When you say it like that, I've never really, I guess, shared that with too many people, but it is insane, isn't it? You know, you're working your butt off to provide. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know.
Yeah.
We had everything. You know, we were financially really good, and whatever my daughter or my wife wanted in terms of materialistic things, they had, but I was never here.
Yeah.
You know, you know, Saturday, Sunday I was here, but I felt like I wanted to make up for not being here all week by taking them out and doing stuff. So I was never actually just sat on my couch on a Saturday watching the football scores come in, or watching a movie with my daughter. I just never had that time to do that.
And I realize how insane it is only because I recognize myself in your story.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a whole bunch of people listening going, what on earth are we doing? What the hell are we doing? Killing ourselves for something that's supposedly, you know, the goal is, you know, it's a materialistic thing that you look at, that you supposedly feel better by being in, or you have a higher status symbol or whatever, but it's killing you to achieve it, to get it. It's like properly killing you. At least that's my experience. It was almost killing me. I was working 16, 17, 18 hours a day sometimes. And those 18 hours weren't all on the tools or anything like that. They were paperwork, they were quotes, they were all sorts of things that needed to be done for the business that I was running, which I'm still running. And I was doing it all on my own, thinking that that's surely the only way that business people run their businesses. They just work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And for me, I hated the entirety of it. Like, I hated the whole thing of it. Now I'm doing it and enjoying it. The challenges are still the same, but the part that I'm doing that takes more time is now my passion project, the Stroke Recovery Podcast, right? Yeah. So I am doing the same amount of hours, but more than half of my day is filled with doing this stuff, which I love and which really makes my heart come alive, you know, and I don't hate it. And I don't feel like I'm being forced to do it. And that's the difference. And I'm at home doing it because this is my garage. It's not it's not a real studio. So do you know what I mean? Like, it's the same amount of effort and energy, but it's so much more rewarding and well worth doing. And previously I was supposedly making more money, but oh man, I wasn't benefiting from it at all.
I had this conversation with my sister just this week, and last week, and she was getting in a bit of a pickle about not owning a house. So she's gone through a bit of a messy divorce and stuff, and she's currently kind of leasing an apartment. And she was kind of getting her knickers in a twist about it. And I said, well, you know, the only person that gets rich off of you owning a house. She said, who? I said, your bank. It's not you. I said, but we're conditioned to think that you've got to own a house, you've got to have your little plot of the world, and you must have your name on the deeds, otherwise you're a failure. Certainly in England, that seems to be the thought process, right? You don't own your own house. Well, you know, you almost get a bit of a look.
Yeah.
But I said, well, it's only the bank. You know, you've got a good life now. You're happy. Your son's well. Why would you be bothered about what the perspective of other people is of you? You know, it's not really that important.
I've got a really tiny place, and it's 3 bedrooms, so it's big enough to fit our family when the kids were growing. And there is no space for a studio, so this is the garage. And there's a space there's a courtyard, and the courtyard is about 40 square meters. And the front, there's no front yard, so it's like a little townhouse type thing. It's very similar to what I see in a lot of the houses on TV in the UK, you know, in the typical UK.
Well, that is our house. That is, you've just described pretty much where we live. only it goes up quite a lot. So it's like 3 stories and very kind of, you'd expect to see it in a Harry Potter film, you know, when they're going down all these little old London streets and stuff.
That's it. Mine's a modern version of one of those. It's 2 stories. And then as a result of that, what that means is the amount of upkeep and time and effort that it takes to get it clean, tidy, all that is no time. It doesn't take any time at all.
Yeah.
The grass, to cut the grass, doesn't exist. There's no such thing as getting out and cutting the lawn. There's a beautiful, I have English box hedges. There's a beautiful, garden that I've manicured over time. And the reason I chose those is because they're really slow growing, and you only need to trim them 2 times a year. And that's about it, right? So I go through this process of trying to decrease the amount of things that I'm doing that I dislike doing, and cutting the grass was one of them. And, maintaining all this other stuff was one of them. And I do all that stuff for a living anyway. So that's the kind of business that I have, right? It's a property maintenance business. So I hate doing my day work. I hate doing it at home on my leisure time.
Yeah.
So that's been able to be a really good thing for me, because as a result of that, now I don't have energy that I need to put into something that that I'm not in that often anyway. So imagine maintaining a backyard, which I used to do in the past before the home that we're living in now. Maintaining a backyard, for us to never be in there unless we were in there probably once or twice a month when people come around. And I'm spending the entire month maintaining it, making sure that everything's perfect and the rest of it. And I can't afford a gardener, so to speak, or anything like that. So I just see it now as this, I see them properties and that kind of stuff as burdens rather than something that I have to make bigger, have the newest, all that kind of stuff, and compare myself to the Joneses and all that type of stuff. I mean, it's completely out of my head that I need to do that. All I need to do is have something that I can live in that literally fits my butt and enables me to sleep in a dry place and is warm. That's it. It's all I need. I don't need anything more than that. And I can downsize so well. Like, I'd be able to be a really good downsizer, whereas my wife's not at that stage. She hasn't been what I've been through from my perspective. And she's not really keen on the big house or any of that stuff. She's none of that stuff. But she hasn't thought about things the way that I think about it. She wouldn't feel the need to downsize. But I reckon I could go from this house to a 2-bedroom place without a problem. I could easily do it. Get rid of 90% of my rubbish that I've got stored around the joint, other than my books, and just feel better about the fact that I've got to do less, and I've got to feel less of. I've got to feel the other people's pockets less often.
Do you know what you just said there? That's kind of struck a chord with me. Is you're talking about. She's not been through what you've been through, like your wife, and so she'll have a completely different perspective on life. So for the past 2 years, I've just understood, after 3 years of hell, I guess, in getting fit again and getting back to the real world, I guess, where you just have to be self-sufficient and just kind of rub yourself down and get on with it, and not have people looking after your every whim and need and stuff, which actually was quite nice. But from a perspective of life, for the past 2 years, I think I've now had to start explaining myself to my wife. This is why I see it like this. So she'll understand it now. I used to get really frustrated with her. I'm like, well, obviously that's crazy to think like that. And she's like, but that's how we've always thought for the last 15 years or 20 years that we've been together. So why are you saying that? Why have you changed? You have to say, well, I have changed, I guess. But as a Joe, I don't really recognise that change anymore. But I guess I have to almost go back looking on myself and say, well, yeah, of course you've changed. Because I guess you'd be pretty arrogant to have that life-changing event and not let it change you. You've almost got to embrace that change and let it happen, I guess.
I don't think the word's arrogant. You'd have to be stupid to go through what you've been through and then insist on remaining the same as you were. You're going backwards. You're not moving forward. It's an opportunity for you to learn and grow from. It's an opportunity for you to see things from a different perspective, which we don't get to do, right? When you had to be in a wheelchair for a small amount of time, like I did, man, I get to see the perspective of those people that have to be in the wheelchair all the time, because I was almost one of them, and I never knew at the beginning whether I would not be that guy. I took it on the chin, and I just thought, whatever comes. If that means I've got to deal with different levels of depression and anxiety and all that kind of stuff, well, I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'll deal with them when they come. But I'm so grateful that I got to experience what it's like to be in a wheelchair, to need to go to the toilet from a wheelchair, and to have nobody next to me to help me. I can't feel my left side, and I've got to drag myself to a toilet because I'm going to crap my pants. And there's nobody around to help me, even though I was in a hospital and they were all busy. So when somebody has a wheelchair and bumps into me, in a crowded place, instead of being the idiot that I was beforehand, who would have thought, what, mate, can't you see me? Now I'm like, well, maybe the guy is just trying to get through in a way that's different to the way that I'm going to get through. And I don't need to be so precious about the fact that I was bumped into by a person in a wheelchair. And you know what it also helped me do? It helped me do this. I do not know regardless of whether somebody's in a wheelchair or not, I do not know what the other person across from me has just been through or is constantly going through. And therefore, I need to be better at being gentler to them and more understanding to them and more empathetic to them before I even knew anything about them. I just need to, that needs to be my default.
One of my closest friends paid me a really nice compliment a while back, and I kind of chucked it back at him, if I'm honest. So we sat out the side of this lovely bar in South. I do other things other than drink, by the way. But it's something I'm really good at and I really enjoy it. So we sat outside this bar and this homeless chap come up to us and asked us for some change. And I said, yeah, of course you can. So I've got some change. And my friend said, you always give money to homeless people now. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when we used to know each other, so we kind of reconnected after I had the stroke. He found out that I'd been really poorly. I think it was right when my life was in a balance. I think a friend of mine, kind of a mutual friend, said, Lee's like really bad. He's really badly ill and, might not actually pull through this. And he said, I need to get back in contact with him. And we have, and kind of kicked off where we left off all those years ago. And we're in this bar and he said, I've really noticed that about you. He said, you do anything to help anybody now, won't you? And I said, well, not anybody, not everybody. I said, but I do think, I said, you see that guy as a homeless guy and he's a pest. I said, I see that guy and think, how did he get to that stage? No one's going to choose that life, right? Like you say, being in a wheelchair, no one would say, that's what I want to do. I want to not be able to walk. No one's going to choose it. No one's going to choose to be homeless and be out on the street. So if, I don't know, a couple of pounds out of my pocket that's, and a fairly irrelevant amount of money buys them a coffee or helps them get through the night, then so be it. I'm happy to do that. And I think you go through that, and like you say, you'd have to be stupid to go through what you've been through, I've been through, and not change your perspective a little, if not a lot. I don't think I've changed it that much. Some people around me would say you've changed loads. I think I've always been I've been very empathetic. People have just maybe not shown it as well as I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not as gentle as I am now with people. I'd be quite hard. So if somebody was homeless, I would be that person go, well, you got yourself like that, you get yourself out of it, whereas now it's like, it's just not that, life's just not that simple. It's not that simple to think that you're in a wheelchair, right? That's not because you're lazy. That's not because it's your fault. You're in a wheelchair. Something bad must have happened either at birth, before, since, whatever. It's just not as straightforward. And I think it has taught me. I think I used to see life through a very straightforward lens, and now I'm kind of a lot more understanding to what other people are going through.
Yeah, the thing about homeless people that you mentioned, I'm the same. And I don't share it with anybody. Nobody knows that I do this because it's not something you need to share. But I reckon there's people like you and me who are listening to this podcast episode who are going, who do the same thing that you do now and that I do now. And that's why I'm mentioning it, because if they are, I'd love to hear from them. And it's like homeless people and I, like we have this unspoken language that as soon as they see me, they feel like they can ask me for a few bucks. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course, no worries. And I always go into the central business district with some coins in my pockets on purpose, and so that I can hand them out to whoever asks. And even if they don't ask, there's plenty of homeless people around that are asking. You could just leave a few coins in their hat or whatever they've got there, their container. So my wife said the same thing to me years ago. She said, well, you're always giving money to homeless people now, just as an observation. And I said, yeah, because I just could have been one. I know that my family technically wouldn't have let me be in that situation. They probably would have pulled out all stops to avoid me from getting into that situation. But I just as easily could have been one of those people, because the mental health issues that come with stroke can be life-changing and life-altering for people to the extent where they don't recognize themselves and they don't know how to go about regular life anymore. And they default to things and make decisions that end up going badly, that can actually put them in that situation where they end up living homeless. So I don't see that they are different from me. I see those people as the same as me. And not only those people, anybody, I see everybody as the same as me now. So I don't differentiate myself. I'm not higher than them. I'm not lower than them. I'm not equal to them. But they're just humans. They're having a human experience, whatever their version of it is. And I used to do the whole, I'm never going to give people money because they're probably going to go buy alcohol or drugs with it or something like that.
Crazy.
And it's such a bullshit thing to say about people. It's like, how judgmental are you that you think you've decided that that's what they're going to go do with it? And even if they do, who cares? Like, if that's what they need to get through the day, and if that's what they need to not try and get money from somebody else in a negative way or rob somebody or whatever, I think that's
or kill
fine.
themselves, or in the extreme, kill themselves. You know, if that's what they need, I think. Yeah, I'm happy to buy someone a beer or whatever if it's going to stop them chucking themselves off a bridge or whatever. Because these people, they're not going to be in a great place mentally, are they?
No, and while they're still alive, there's still hope for change and recovery and overcoming. And I'll never forget, the thing that cemented it for me was, we've got this really famous pub in Melbourne. It's across the road from our main station, the Flinders Street station. It's called the Young and Jacksons. And there was a lady sitting there and she was asking for some food, for some money. And I just squat down and sat next to her for a little bit. And we were having a chat, and she was telling me she came from another state. And while she was here, things didn't go the way she planned. And literally within a couple of months, she had no money and she was homeless. And the person that she had come with had left her or whatever, and they separated. And she was trying to get enough money to get some sleep, to get a place to sleep that evening. So I think they have to pay a small amount. But then the only way to get that money is to ask. So I said to her, so what do you need right now? She said, it'd be good if you could go get me a feed. The local McDonald's was down the road. What did you like? She said, get me some McDonald's. She told me what to get her. I went and got her the meal. I think it was $6 or $7. And then brought it back to her. We had another chat. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, I let her eat and I left. And then it was literally no more than 6 months later, I'm just flicking through the channels on the TV and I see this face that I recognize. And I was just trying to work out who this person is. Why do I recognize her? And she had just landed permanent state-based accommodation that she was able to live in. And she was talking to the reporter that was interviewing her about how it's going to change her life, how it's going to make her feel safe, how it's going to impact the rest of her life, the fact that she had just somehow landed this government-run accommodation. And for me, that was it. That was the absolute kicker. Not that I needed one anymore, but that was the kicker. It proved to me that people are just looking for a way to make the situation better when they ask you for money. They're not actually doing anything else. They're just trying to make their situation better dollar by dollar,
Yeah.
pound by pound, whatever it is, and they just need help. So I don't think there's anything better than just speaking to random people who look like they need help, even if they're not asking for money, even if they're just sitting lonely on a chair or on a train or in a bus. I think there's nothing better than just reaching out to somebody and saying, "G'day."
No, I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that.
That's the part that I've taken from all of this, like, amongst other things, like, I was never the guy. I was never the guy that did that. Something so dramatic had to happen to me for me to appreciate the difficulties that other people might be going through. And I'm bloody thankful for the lesson. Let me tell you, I was such an idiot, such a thickhead before that, and not through any kind of, it was from being ignorant. That's all. It was just from being ignorant, not from malice or me trying to be mad or anything like that. It was just from being ignorant and having lived a ideal life for 37 years, which I'm totally grateful for. But now that my life's had this massive speed bump, I'm also totally grateful for. I wouldn't change it.
You know, I was trying to explain this to my daughter. We were talking about coming on this podcast today, and I said, you can sit and listen in if you like. She said, I'll take the mickey out of you, so I'll go on up to bed. You know, she said, what are you going to say? I said, I don't know. I said, we'll see what's asked. I said, but I think, you know, hopefully it'll be quite natural, the conversation, which it has, by the way. It's been really natural. She said, oh, how do you feel about the stroke then, Dad? I said, well, I'm kind of glad it happened. So, you know, would I want to go through it again? No. Would I wish it on somebody else? Absolutely not, no. But I feel like a better, more rounded person for the fact that this happened. And I think my life decisions now are better informed as a result of it happening. So, I'm totally down with what you're saying, you know, grateful for those life lessons that it's given you, because without them, you know, you'd be, I dare say you weren't a complete ignoramus, but no, you'd still be that person that was, you know, a little bit ignorant to other people's needs and challenges. I definitely was.
I really would, because I wasn't indicating a change in lifestyle or behavior in any way, shape or form before that. I wasn't indicating it at all. I mean, I got really stuck into personal development and tried to find some amazing courses that are going to shift my perspective and allow me to deal with all of the trauma that I'd been through and that my family had been through. And then the new way that we were going about life, like, I really had to gain the skills to be able to just deal with it. If I didn't gain those skills, it would have been a much worse outcome for me mentally. I don't think I would have made it mentally. So what I wished, not even wished, but the way I reflect on it is, wouldn't it have been great to learn what we've learned without going through something so challenging and difficult? Give me the lessons, give me the growth and the lessons, park the suffering. But I don't think they come separately. I think they come hand in hand.
I think you're right. You kind of have to go through that to truly understand, right?
Yeah, you do. And when somebody hasn't gone through that, they won't truly understand. And then deeply knowing that about them, that makes me feel okay as well, that they don't understand. The person on the other side of the chair doesn't understand. And I'm like, I'm kind of glad you don't understand.
Yeah.
You know, and it's less frustrating.
It took me a while to get to that stage, I think, to realize that not everybody would understand or see the world through a similar lens. But I think once you get it, you're kind of like, do you know what? I'm glad you don't see it like that, because the reason I do is because I went through this horrendous thing that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemies, let alone a loved one. So I totally get that.
Yeah. And then isn't it cool that while the people around you don't understand, there's a whole bunch of us around the world that do understand?
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think there's people around me that, as a result of me, I mean, they all went through it as well, right? You know, I think you could sit here with my brother, my sister, my best friend, my wife, my daughter, and have an equally good and informed conversation about the impact of a stroke, because they saw it. They tell you what happened to me, but they tell you what happened to them as well, and the sheer bloody hell it was for them to live that life. So I think it's, they have changed as a result in the main for the good. I would say. I think it's made them all a little bit more empathetic. I know, certainly my brother and sister, sort of, they'll talk, oh God, when you go and see your big brother who you think is immortal, the big bully of the family in hospital looking like this could be the last days on the planet, it's a rude awakening, So I think it affects everybody around you.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to have people around you.
Yeah.
Because, I saw people in hospital that definitely aren't. You sort of see them, you think every day on the nail, as soon as it was kind of visiting time in hospital, I had people around by my bed, whether that's my wife, my daughter, my mother and father-in-law, my stepdad, all my aunties and all friends and all sorts. But equally, I saw people in hospital, days go by, no visitors. You just think that's really sad, really sad.
Yeah.
So I think if you're lucky enough to have those people around you, they'll change as a result of it. And I think that's something to definitely not forget if you're unfortunate enough to be in that position where you've had that happen to you. People around you will change as well. It's going to change you, but it's going to change them too.
Yeah, absolutely. It does change people. I know a lot of people, some people didn't know what to do, how to behave, what to say, all of that stuff. Some people didn't come. Some people that I didn't expect to come turned up and were way more empathetic than I ever expected them to be. And if you're somebody listening who's perhaps in a situation where where you don't have a lot of people around you, reach out to other stroke survivors. They'll get you. There's a whole world of people on Instagram, Facebook, social media is really good for that. Perhaps not in your local community, but there are heaps of people that are willing to share. For example, Lee and I, we do not know each other from a bar of soap, yet here we are. We're on a podcast. We're chatting about stuff. I feel like I've known him forever. And we have a kinship. There's something that we share that you can't really explain or describe, but here we are interacting, and it's that easy. That's how easy it is to find amazing people to interact with. Just be a bit braver and don't really worry about the fact that...
I really admire, I see online a lot of people really kind of document their recovery. I could never do that.
Yeah.
In fact, I've seen footage of me. They did some filming of me when I was learning to walk again, and I saw it when I was volunteering, and I literally had to leave the room so I could feel myself going, because I just looked so weak and so poorly. I was like, this is why. Now I see why my best bud turned up in hospital and had to turn around because he was just burst into tears. My brother, the same. Now I know why they were, because I just looked like a shadow of myself. So I really admire people that do document it though, and I always comment messages of support and stuff. So I just think that's one. It's really brave, really brave. I don't think there'd be, I think there's the pessimists out there go, oh, look at me, I've done this today, and I think it's really good, and it's really good motivation, hopefully, for the people out there that are struggling. And you see people doing marathons and stuff like that. So it's great.
It does both. It does motivate other people, and it also is really good to celebrate your wins and go back and reflect on how far you've come, because a lot of people forget to do that. And sometimes, even I did, you get stuck in the whole, oh my gosh, it's been 12 months. I still can't talk properly or remember, or whereas my counselor used to say to me, my gosh, look how far you've come. You weren't speaking like this 6 months ago or 5 months ago or whatever. And she had to do the reminding for me. So I didn't have the sense to do the personal journal or any of that thing, or document myself in any way. But the people that are doing it, I think it's such an amazing thing, because what it also shows is the progression of the recovery. So you get to see that person in hospital, they're a goner, and then you get to see them get better and better and better. And then if you've been following them for long enough and they're 2 or 3 years down the track, you get to really experience the growth and the stages. And that's such a good thing. That is exactly what we need to demonstrate, and what I needed. I needed to see people that are been through what I'd been through many years earlier and had come out the other side. And I got that instantly with a mate of mine now, a guy who's a mate of mine now, who had been through a dissection of one of his carotid arteries. He'd also passed out through heart failure at the same time. and then they stitched him up and fixed him up. And when I got to him, he was about 10 years beyond that. So it happened to him in his early 20s and in his late 20s, and he was 10 years beyond that. And I was going into surgery a week later. And I said to him, Andrew, I just need to know that it's possible to get better, because I've got this surgery coming up. They're going to open my head up and they're going to take this faulty blood vessel out. And I don't know what I'm going to be like after that, And just him being there and telling me his story and then being able to see him, I just felt like, okay, well, this is doable. We could certainly do something. So that's what I love about people who actually document it. They think they're doing it for themselves, like there's a bit of but they're doing so much more for other people. It's just same as this podcast. It's just amazing.
Totally agree.
So what's the future hold? Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking about, how the next few years.
So the next 2 years will be, so I live in the middle of England. So if you look at England as a map, I live literally, we couldn't be further away from water. Like literally where we live is the furthest part of England away from water, unless it rains, which it does a lot. So we're moving back down to the south coast, which is where both me and my wife are from. But we're going to wait till my daughter finishes her studies and goes off to university to do that, let her kind of finish her, I hasten to call her a child because she is 16 years old and clearly knows everything. But once she's kind of finished sixth form education, we'll all move back to the south of the country. She'll probably head off to university or stuff. So my business at the minute, I predominantly base myself on the south of the country to build the business there so that when we move back, I feel the benefit of not having all the travel to do.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting. We're going to, moving back down to our hometown will be really exciting to get back down there. It's been 13 years since we've lived there, so it's been a long time. We moved up here for what was going to be a year, and that was 13 years ago. And here I am talking to you now, Glenn. In 2 years' time, we will eventually get back there. But yeah, so that's what the next 2 years holds. Hopefully the business will hold out and keep doing well. I think, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but they're saying that in England in 2030, there will be no petrol or diesel cars. It'll be all electric cars. I think it's the biggest scam in the world, by the way. This is all to, obviously to save the environment, but I'm also acutely aware of how long these batteries last in cars and stuff. So I'm not sure that's going to happen, but if it does, that'll have a detrimental effect on my business because essentially, I make petrol heads go faster, not electric heads, because there's not such a thing yet.
I don't think it's going to end in 2030. It's no chance it's going to end, and it's not because it's too soon, because you can't just switch off something that has been going for 100 and so years in 10. You just can't switch it off. There's too much reliance on it, and you can't.
Just think of the infrastructure straight away that you would need to go to that it's not even close to being ready. People go, oh, there's more electric points now. Yes, there is more. But if everybody had a car, what would the queue be like at the one electric point that's going to get to him,
Yeah, that's the thing that I see. I love things that are about protecting us from, from ourselves, planetary protection, all that kind of stuff. It's our home. We need to protect it. I get it all. But the rhetoric around it is a little bit ridiculous, in my opinion, as if the people who are putting all this stuff together don't know that it's not going to be done in 10 years' time. The politicians are the ones, I think, that muddy the waters with regards to conversations, because what they need to do is win power. They need to get back into power. So they talk the talk to get into power. But we have a train line, man. We have a train line that they've been talking about for 40 years that needs to go from the Tullamarine Airport, which is the main airport in Melbourne, to the Central Business District, which is about a 50-kilometre stretch. They've been talking about a train line for 40 years and it's still not in. This is one of the most livable cities in the world. There's 6 million people in here and they cannot get a train line in from one part of the town to the other part of the town. And they're telling us they're going to switch off all this stuff in 10 years. I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I'm a massive skeptic of it all. I think, it's certainly in England, it's won votes over the past few years because,
That's
We
what
do
it
need
is.
a greener planet. We do need to
I
push
agree.
on and, like you say, save us from ourselves, because that is clearly what is ruining the planet. Is humans that are ruining it, not animals.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's no chance.
There's none.
So
And
fingers
not only
crossed.
that,
Business of people.
there is a need for fossil fuel use because they go into the manufacture of everything else. It may stop the polluting of the atmosphere to the extent the air that we breathe, etc., and change the chemical composition of our environment, and that's all cool. But you won't be out of a business because all those classic cars that exist will still need to exist. People will still be driving them. They may have different rules around how they are driven and where you can fill them and where you can fill them up and all that type of thing, but they'll still exist. I think you're good for another 40 or 50 years, mate. Really, I really think
that'll do me. To be honest, another 15 and I'm good. Another 15, I'll be quite happy to. What I'm going to move into when we move to the coast, I'm going to move into doing boats as well.
Yeah, well, there you go.
So yeah,
there you go.
That I guess will be the next thing, because they do use a lot of fuel, boats.
Yeah, but there you go. I think you'll be fine for now, and I hope they work it out and they do save us from ourselves and they make the planet healthier. There's no doubt about that. I really hope they do that, and I'm behind that every step of the way. Please find us solutions. But politicians, they just say stuff that is going to get them voted that they think is popular. If something that wasn't popular in the majority of the people changed overnight, the politician would change overnight. They would change their story and their rhetoric overnight. So, mate, I really appreciate you reaching out and connecting. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for doing the podcast. It's great.
My pleasure. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and feel free to reach out anytime.
And you too, Bill.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. I hope you like the show. To learn more about my guests, including their links, and to follow them and download a full transcript of the entire interview, please go to recoveryafterstroke.com/episodes. If you would like to support this podcast, the best way to do it is leave a 5-star review and a few words about what the show means to you on iTunes and Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Sharing this show with family and friends on social media will make it possible for people who may need this type of content to find it easier, and that may make a massive difference to someone that is on the road to recovery after their own experience with stroke. Thanks again for being here and listening. I really appreciate you. See you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.